You noble diggers, all stand up now.
Welcome, comrade. Never forget the forms.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to my channel. Today we will be talking about the entire history of Western philosophy, part 8. And today we are on Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is a historical production. He is not a person.
Immanuel Kant was a real pissant who was very rarely stable.
We are here to disrespect him. I've decided to completely abandon the pretense of objectivity for the day, for the presentation of the moment, because I can't do it. I can't muster it. It's not convincing. It's not my style. I'm just going to tell you what I think. And Immanuel Kant is a scam. Is one of the biggest scams run on the world right now. I've run into many Kantians, people who follow the teachings of Kant still, in my time in academia. 2 law professors and 1 philosophy professor still follow this guy from 300 years ago, 200 years ago. And basically within his lifetime, he was superseded. So you shouldn't take this guy seriously, but he almost forces you to take him seriously because he is so autistic. He is so high functioning. His Latin, his verbosity, his prose, it's all upper crust. But what you need to remember is that experientially, biologically, characteristically, we disrespect this guy. This is a virgin who died a virgin at 80 years old, swaddled by his manservant every night. Took the same walk every day. Really autistic, right? And his place in history is to defend the kingdom of Prussia and the kingdom of Prussia's way of doing business. But we're just going to back up just a little bit because the kingdom of Prussia is too far in history to explain what's going on in Europe at that time. Right? What had just finished about 100 years before was the 30 Years' War, right? The biggest war in Europe until the Napoleonic Wars. Millions dead, starved, all that. And in my opinion, it kicks off this Protestant Catholic holy war thing, and religion's got basically nothing to do with it. This is political. That the power that the Habsburgs were centering on themselves in Vienna and, less importantly, Madrid, but Vienna, was rising to global hegemonic status. That within foreseeable time, all the strategic leaders could see that it was going to be the Habsburgs' world at that time. It would be a Habsburg Roman Catholic Church. It would probably be Habsburg popes all the time. It would be Habsburg. That's because they controlled so much land, so much power, so many men, that the other kingdoms would be unable to resist and eventually be absorbed. And so they basically all banded together and used whatever excuse they could grasp a hold of to fight as hard as they can. And any perfidy that helped them fight harder was elevated, maybe even sacralized, you could say, to a Protestant. And the evidence of this is that it continually pops up as resistance to Habsburgism, right? The Hussites are Bohemians, right? Because it's earlier on and the power that the Habsburg has is not as definite, not as full. The resistance is natural. It pops up basically as a peasants' revolt. And so this is the first time Protestantism is used by innovators, by on the unthinking. And Protestantism allows you to focus the world of the church, right? The brotherhood of all men within one society, within one city-state. Prague is this one. And by making you the decider of the Bible's words, right? You are bound by best practices and competition with everyone else. But the King James version of the Bible is the Bible nowadays, right? It's just what it is. It has power, the words within it, and the power to decide which words are selected is also useful, also ideological fuel, firepower. And so the outer core of the Holy Roman Empire, non-member states, right, but cultural peripheries, start to experiment with this Protestant thing that they see popping off in the German princes, because they see the power that it grants the princes as an outsized amount of power, as should be according to their station within the Holy Roman Empire. And if that little prince can do that, what can a king do? And so we enter the Denmark and then the Swedish phases of the 30 Years' War. And that's a Protestant king and then a different Protestant king, and they're using their status as the head of the Church of Denmark or the head of the Church of Sweden to invoke more authority, right? You can think about it kind of like the royal institution in the Commonwealth, that the king and the prime minister were separated so as to create a fantasy that allows power to be a theater, right? But in the Roman model, which this is kind of based off of, the religious and the secular were separated, the Pope and the kings. And this is supposed to make a theater, a play acting of power that allows for a greater complexity, a greater size of humanity. But it's actually a limiter if you have genius, if you are a real leader, if you are a Gustavus Adolphus. What do you need someone else to play act, right? You'll play both roles. You'll be the leader of men, you'll be the servant of God, you'll do it all, right? And that's what the Carolingians did, the Carolingian dynasty did. They went on a tear, and they went on a tear because they were directed by their own zeal, right? By what they had within them. And what they had within them turned out to be, worth about 3 or 4 Slavs, but turns out they had 5 or 6 or maybe even 8 or 9 Slavs for every Swede, so it didn't matter. But after they're done, trundling around in Germany during the 30 Years' War, the states that are left in North Germany, which were already Protestant, but are now firmly Protestant, right, and are not as atomized, right? There are states that look more like states. The Kingdom of Saxony, the Duchy of Brandenburg. Duchy of Brandenburg especially becomes the Kingdom of Prussia. And Prussia is where Immanuel Kant comes from. And just a little factoid about Prussia that I love. The king had the right to corporally punish anyone. So he would just walk around town, beat people with his cane because he didn't think they were working hard enough or doing their job right. And this went on, well into the 1700s, right? Like in maybe even to the 1800s, into the mid 1800s. So Prussia is backwards. It's crazy, right? And they're crazy because they want military expansion. They are devoted to it, right? They are hallucinating. They cannot stand that the minor powers of the world, right? The French, the English, and the Dutch especially, have banded together in such a perfidious way to keep power from where it naturally lies, right? Which is, as we said many episodes ago, hegemony of the world was the Germans from about 900 to let's call it 1650. Natural hegemons of the world. They don't need to expand because everyone offers them tribute. They know, the others know that it's the German crown that really rules. The emperor in the east can claim what he wants, right? The Byzantine emperor, the Ottoman Turk claiming to be emperor. Everyone knows it's the Holy Roman Emperor who really leads the successor of the Catholics. And after the 30 Years' War, the Holy Roman Emperor doesn't mean anything, right? It's a title that is honored more than power. And it's dissolved by Napoleon in 1805 or 6. So the intellectuals that this kingdom is picking, right? And he is an intellectual. He's not, like a moron like Descartes. Uh, they're being picked for their obsequiousness, for their submissiveness to the system, right? The king is walking around beating peasants for not farming hard enough. So what is this guy doing? The doctor of philosophy for the kingdom of Prussia, basically. He's singing the praises of God, right? And what God has offered us is a direct contempt, direct rebuke of Socrates, you know that you know nothing, which is the lesson of this course. And so how does he do that, right? He has to be able to show that you can know things, and that they are ensured by God and required for the ideological knowledge set that you have, for the belief system that you operate in. And with that, we're going to turn to The Critique of Pure Reason, a big book. Not a lot needed, though. Philosophy requires a science that determines the possibility, the principles, and the range of all a priori knowledge. Now it seems natural that as soon as we have left the solid ground of experience, we should not at once proceed to erect an edifice with knowledge which we possess without knowing whence it came, and trusting to principles the origin of which is unknown, not having assured ourselves of the safety of the foundation through careful examination. It would seem natural, I say, that we should first of all have asked the question how the understanding could arrive at this a priori knowledge, and what range, what validity, and what value it might have. For one part of this knowledge, namely the mathematical, has always been of established trustworthiness, and thus gives rise to a favorable presumption also with regard to other parts, although these may be of quite different nature. Besides, once we are beyond the precincts of experience, we are certain of not being refuted by experience. The charm of expanding our knowledge is so great that nothing will stop our progress until we encounter a clear contradiction. Mathematics provides us with a splendid example of how far we can advance independently of experience with a priori knowledge. I feel like any Kantians that will come across this will say that I'm dealing with him in bad faith. I say he is in bad faith. I say that Kantians are in bad faith. How dare they even say there's a possibility of truth, right? What he's talking about there, mathematics as being a truth that you can arrive at independently of experience. I'd like to see him try. I don't know if you remember how you were taught math, but I remember circles and experiences and actual things to count. And if we're really getting granular on the whole thing, even if that didn't happen and he was taught ideally, with the forms and just the written word or whatever his conception of that is, that relies on experience at bottom, right? That you're just trusting the experiences of someone else, and then the experience there is just the testimony of whoever is teaching you at that point, right? So pi is arrived at not through mathematical certainty, not through mathematical deduction, but through playing with circles, right? Through experience of circles, through drawing lines through circles. No such thing as synthetic a priori knowledge. It's not possible. Much is gained if we are able to bring a number of investigations under the formula of one single problem. For we thus not only facilitate our own work by determining it accurately, but also enable anyone else who cares to examine it to form judgment as to whether we have really done justice to our project or not. Now, the real problem of pure reason is contained in the question, how are synthetic judgments a priori possible? The metaphysics has hitherto remained in so vacillating a state of uncertainty and contradiction is entirely due to the fact that people have never previously thought of this problem, or perhaps even of a distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. The solution of this problem, or the sufficient proof that a possibility which it demands to have explained does in reality not exist at all, is a question of life or death to metaphysics. David Hume, who among all philosophers came closest to this problem, though he was far from conceiving it with sufficient definiteness and universality, confining his attention only to the synthetic proposition about the connection of an effect with its causes. Principium causalitatis. He believed he had discovered that such an a priori proposition is entirely impossible. According to his conclusions, everything which we call metaphysics would turn out to be a mere delusion of rational insight into what reality is, only borrowed from experience, and has by mere habit assumed the appearance of necessity. If he had grasped our problem in all its universality, he would never have thought of an assertion which destroys all pure philosophy, because he would have perceived that, according to his argument, no pure mathematical science was possible either, on account of its entirely containing synthetic a priori propositions. From such an assertion, his good sense would probably have saved him. Just disagree about math, right? What is math? That you can arrive at things that are constantly true from the hallucinations, right, does not mean that those are synthetically true. They are synthetically useful, right? They lead to wrong results all the time. They are an imposition on reality. They're something that you set over reality, and if it doesn't match up, you have to drop that. What are you going to drop? Reality? And, math is not universal and perfect. It does not work at the quantum level. It does not work at the galactic level. And so, whatever. We just dismiss him nowadays. But it was much harder back in his day because he was talking a lot and not saying much, using big words. Principium causalitatis. But were synthetic a priori judgments. What that means, by the way, synthetic a priori. A priori just means before experience, right? Prior to. And then synthetic is a combination of those two truths to lead to new truths. 7 plus 5 equals 12 is a synthetic a priori. But also, you just think about that for a second. 7 plus 5 equals 12 is something that you arrive at from experience, and its independent usefulness is something, hallucinatory. I can't even begin to understand what you mean with its independent usefulness, right? Its usefulness is everything. The science of mathematics presents the most brilliant example of how pure reason may successfully expand its domain without the aid of experience. Such examples are always contagious, particularly for the faculty which naturally flatters itself that it will meet the same success in other cases that it has had in this one. Thus, pure reason hopes to be able to expand its domain as successfully and as thoroughly in its transcendental as in its mathematical use. So he says that because math is so useful, that the mind reaches for the same kind of certainty from philosophy. But, can't be, is wrong. Just because something reaches for something else doesn't mean that that's the good, or that it must be because of that. It is a hang-up, an ideological hang-up of the system, that we have these people suffused within our leadership caste that are always looking to know, to systematize, but with certainty, with like religious zeal behind it. on the ideal of the highest good as a determining ground of the ultimate end of pure reason. Reason in its speculative use conducted us through the field of experience, and as it could find no perfect satisfaction there, from thence to speculative ideas, which, however, in the end conducted us back again to experience, and thus they fulfilled their purpose in a manner which, though useful, was not at all in accordance with our expectation. We may now have one more attempt, namely to see whether pure reason may be met also in practical use, and whether thus it may lead to ideas which reach the highest ends of pure reason that we have just stated, and whether, therefore, from the point of view of its practical interest, reason may not be able to grant us what is entirely denied us with regard to its speculative interest. All interest of my reason, whether speculative or practical, is concentrated in the three following questions. What can I know? What ought I to do? What may I hope? The first question is merely speculative. We have, as I flatter myself, exhausted all possible answers to it, and found at last the one answer with which no doubt reason must be satisfied, and except with regard to the practical, has just cause to be satisfied. We remained, however, as far removed from the two great ends to which the whole endeavor of pure reason was really directed at, as if, through love of ease, we had declined the whole task from the very beginning. As far, then, as knowledge is concerned, so much is certain and clear with regard to these two problems: we shall never attain knowledge. Pure reason, therefore, contains, not indeed in its speculative, but in its practical, or more accurately, its moral use, principles of the possibility of experience, namely of such actions as might be met with according to moral precepts in the history of humanity. For since pure reason commands that such actions ought to take place, they must be capable of taking place. Consequently, a certain kind of systematic unity, namely moral unity, must be possible. While it was impossible to prove the systematic unity of nature according to the speculative principles of reason, for reason, no doubt, possesses causality with respect to freedom in general, but not with respect to the whole of nature, and moral principles of reason may indeed produce free action, but not laws of nature. Consequently, the principles of pure reason possess objective reality in their practical, and more particularly in their moral use. Of all the sciences of reason, a priori, therefore, mathematics alone can be learnt, but philosophy never, except historically, with regard to reason. We can at most learn to philosophize. All philosophy is either knowledge derived from pure reason or rational knowledge derived from empirical principles. The former is called pure, the latter empirical philosophy. He separates philosophy and science. A sin. The immortal science of Marxism-Leninism. They call it that because it is scientific in its approach to philosophy and history. It measures, it uses data, it is, we'll get to it when we get to Marx, but it is meticulous. We said in the episode about Descartes that there was thinkers like Francis Bacon who were placing nature on the rack, right? Torturing the information out of nature. And so therefore, why would you separate philosophy from this thought pattern, this ideological framing? If only because your philosophy, your ideology, if not for only this reason, that the ideology that you hold is incompatible with a world, with a universe of mechanisms, of mechanistics. And so, that's why the Kingdom of Prussia and eventually its successor states, the Kingdom of Germany, the German Empire, and the Nazi Germany fail, and they fail so spectacularly. It's because the system that breeds, that weeds, that gardens the dynasties that will be the controlling minds of the system, has weeded and selected for craziness, for psychos, right? Nuts people, goose stepping and, stomping all over Europe without the numbers or the material to do it. If the philosophers, the leaders of Germany, had been materialists going into the 20th century, into the 19th century even, then they would not have so ridiculously tried to fight the whole world. They would not have tried to reclaim their spot as hegemon with force, because they would have realized it was too late for that, and that they would have had a better path for their people had they not fought. The population of the German Empire might be 150 million people today if they kept their pre-war borders and not lost so many people in the war. And also the so many potential people, right? You got to think all those sons and brothers who are lost are all those potential fathers that never have children, right? And all those spinsters or women at home without husbands that aren't producing kids. And I don't mean to sound like a Catholic natalist or something like that, but it is essential to this whole endeavor that we try and keep producing kids for the population. So we're moving on to Hegel next week, but we're going to do another aside, another interlude, because I think Hegel's too tough, and that sitting down and just reading him like we did with the Kant is arrogance at its finest. And so we're going to do a gap episode of Kojève, who is a 1920s French philosopher whose claim to fame is he finally explained Hegel to the French. He explained it to me too, so whatever you do. But it'll make things easier. We'll just do that. We'll just do a couple sections of that book, and then we'll jump right back into the philosophy of right or the philosophy of spirit. I don't know which one we'll do first. But what we're going to see is that despite how autistic Kant is, that there is even more autism out there. There's always a bigger autist.
There's always a bigger fish.
And what we'll see is that, whatever Latin and verbosity that Kant achieved here, and it was seen as like the height of what was achievable when he was writing in the late 1700s, it's quickly topped by the bourgeois workman like ethic, shopkeeper work ethic of the professional classes of the 1800s, which Hegel is of course a part of, right? He's a lower nobility bourgeois professor. Thank you. Have a nice day. Hello, you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you. This channel has one mission: to prevent civilizational collapse associated with climate change, to prevent 100 million refugees by 2035, to stop 7 billion from starving to death by 2075. And we will do this through one main vehicle. We mean to unite the Anglosphere. We will do this by convincing the Commonwealth of His Majesty King Charles III to apply for statehood as one. And then with this new power, we will be able to negotiate in good faith with the rest of the world on how to tackle this crisis. Thank you and enjoy.